Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a part-time college student working nights at a warehouse to pay for my classes. Money's tight, so I do my grocery shopping at this discount place downtown. It's not fancy, but they have good prices and the staff is pretty decent. The place gets busy on weekends, so they set up these priority lanes for seniors and people with disabilities. They even put plastic benches there so folks don't have to stand while waiting. I was there picking up my usual stuff, cheap pasta, canned goods, the basics. Nothing exciting. I've been working double shifts all week and was dead tired, but I needed food for the next few days. The regular checkout lines were packed, so I got in the longest one and just accepted I'd be waiting a while. Right next to me was the priority lane and there were three elderly people sitting on the benches. Two ladies who looked like they were in their 70s and an old man with a walking cane propped against his knee. They were chatting quietly and seemed content to wait their turn. Pretty normal scene. Then this guy shows up, mid-40s maybe, wearing expensive looking hiking boots and one of those outdoor jackets that probably cost more than my monthly rent. He's got this huge cart loaded with camping gear, sleeping bags, a fancy portable stove, those metal camping plates, bags of marshmallows, instant coffee, the works. Clearly planning some kind of weekend adventure. Instead of getting in line like a normal person, he just walks right up to the priority lane and plants himself at the front, not behind the seated seniors, in front of them, like they weren't even there. The elderly folks looked at each other with these confused expressions. The man with the cane started to say something, but the guy was already on his phone, completely ignoring everyone around him. I spoke up and told him that the elderly people were already in line and waiting. The guy looked at me like I was some annoying fly buzzing around his head. He told me in this dismissive, smug voice that he didn't see them standing in line, like he'd found some clever loophole in basic human decency. The two elderly ladies looked uncomfortable, and the old man gripped his cane tighter, but none of them said anything. They probably didn't want to cause trouble. I felt my face getting hot. I wanted to say more, but the guy had already turned back to his phone call and was talking loud enough for half the store to hear about some camping trip he was planning. He was bragging to whoever was on the other end about how he had everything they needed for their trip. He went on about how the weather was supposed to be perfect this weekend and how they were gonna eat like kings out there. His voice was so loud and obnoxious that other customers were starting to stare. I bit my tongue and tried to focus on my own stuff, but I kept looking over at those three seniors just sitting there, clearly upset but too polite to make a scene. It was eating at me. A few minutes passed. The line moved slowly and I found myself studying this guy's cart more closely. He had everything you'd need for a camping trip: tent, sleeping bag, camping chairs, cooler, paper plates, plastic cups, instant noodles, coffee, even marshmallows for s'mores. And there, sitting right on top of his pile of gear, was a single can of butane gas for his portable stove. That's when the idea hit me. The guy was still on his phone, pacing back and forth while he talked. He kept moving away from his cart, gesturing with his free hand when he bragged about his outdoor adventures to whoever was on the other end. He was telling his friend to trust him because he knew what he was doing. He boasted about having the best gear and the best spot picked out. He kept saying this trip was gonna be legendary. His whole attitude was just dripping with arrogance. He was so caught up in his conversation that he wasn't paying attention to anything else. The elderly people were still sitting there looking defeated. The store employees were busy with other customers and hadn't noticed what was happening. I looked around. Nobody was watching me. The guy had his back turned about 10 feet away from his cart, still talking loudly on his phone. I made my decision. I reached over and plucked the butane can from his cart. It was small, maybe the size of a soda can, and I slipped it into my own basket without anyone noticing. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face neutral and pretended to be checking my shopping list. The guy finished his call and came back to his cart. He didn't even look at his items, just started pushing toward the cashier when his turn came up. The three seniors watched him go, still looking upset about the whole thing. I watched him check out, saw him load his bags into his cart, and watched him walk out of the store. He never once looked back at his gear or double-checked his list, just strutted out like he owned the place. When my turn came, I paid for my groceries and the butane can. Cost me an extra $8, but it felt worth it. The cashier didn't ask any questions, probably thought I was buying it for myself. I'd never stolen anything before, and technically, I guess I hadn't stolen anything now either since I paid for it. But I definitely messed with someone's plans. The three elderly people were loading their groceries into a car when I passed by. The old man with the cane nodded at me and thanked me for speaking up in there. He said not many people would have bothered to say anything. His voice was kind but sad. I just smiled and nodded back. If only he knew what I'd really done. Now I keep imagining what happened next. This guy probably drove out to his campsite, maybe a couple hours away. He probably spent the whole drive bragging to his buddies about how he'd outsmarted the system at the grocery store, how he was too clever to wait in line like everyone else. I picture him setting up his tent, arranging his gear, getting ready to cook his first meal. He probably felt pretty good about himself when he unpacked his fancy portable stove and started opening his instant noodles. Maybe he was planning to make coffee for everyone, show off his camping skills, and then he reached for his butane can. I imagine him digging through his bags, checking every pocket, getting more and more frustrated. Maybe he accused his friends of moving it. Maybe he drove to 3 different stores trying to find a replacement, only to discover that most places don't sell butane cans after dark. So instead of the hot meal he'd been bragging about, he probably ended up eating cold instant noodles straight from the package. No coffee, no s'mores, just crunchy noodles and the growing realization that maybe karma had caught up with him. He'll never know what happened. I hate being late. The stress of rushing around, checking the clock every 5 seconds, and worrying about what people will think just eats away at me. So I developed a simple system: leave way earlier than I need to, grab a coffee, and cruise to work with time to spare. My morning routine was straightforward. I'd wake up, get ready, and head out a full hour before my shift started at the manufacturing plant. The drive was only 30 minutes on the highway, but I liked having that buffer. I stop at this little coffee shop about halfway through my commute, get my usual medium black coffee, and then spend the rest of the drive listening to music and mentally preparing for the day ahead. The job itself wasn't bad. I worked in quality control, checking parts as they came off the assembly line. It was steady work with decent pay and benefits. I've been there for almost 3 years and had a solid reputation for being reliable. My attendance record was spotless. I showed up early pretty much every single day. My supervisor was a different story. He was one of those guys who seemed to take pleasure in finding fault with everyone, always looking for reasons to write people up or make examples out of them. He'd been promoted from the floor about 6 months earlier, and the power had definitely gone to his head. Most of us just tried to stay out of his way and do our jobs. That particular Tuesday started like any other. I got my coffee, hopped back in my car, and merged onto the highway. About 10 minutes into the drive, I noticed traffic was moving slower than usual. No big deal, I thought. I had plenty of time. But then we came to a complete stop. I sat there for nearly 40 minutes. Cars weren't moving at all. Turns out there had been a 3-car accident up ahead, and they had to shut down 2 lanes to clear it. I kept checking my phone, watching the minutes tick by. Even with my early departure, I was cutting it close. When traffic started moving again, I knew I was going to be late. I drove fast without being reckless, but I still walked through the factory doors 6 minutes after my shift was supposed to start. 6 minutes. Not exactly the crime of the century. I was barely at my station when my supervisor came walking over. He was loud enough that half the floor could hear him. He called out to everyone, telling them to look at me and pointing out that my morning coffee was apparently more important than respecting my co-workers. I felt my face get hot. Everyone was staring at me now. I tried explaining that there was a massive traffic jam on the highway and that I left an hour early like I always do. But he cut me off, asking sarcastically if I had time to stop for coffee, but not time to get to work on time. I told him I bought the coffee before I knew there was going to be a traffic jam and that I've been sitting on the highway for the past 40 minutes. He just rolled his eyes and said those were excuses, claiming this was exactly the kind of attitude that drags down the whole team. He kept going on and on, really making a show of it. I tried explaining about the accident, about how I'm always early, about how this was completely out of my control, but he wasn't having any of it. He pulled out his little notebook and started writing me up right there in front of everyone. He told me that maybe next time I think twice about making my morning coffee routine more important than my job. The whole thing was humiliating. I've been working there for 3 years, never missed a day, always showed up early, and now I was being treated like some kind of slacker because of 6 minutes and a traffic accident I had no control over. Later that day, I looked up the company policy in the employee handbook. It clearly said that being less than 5 minutes late was acceptable, but anything 5 minutes or more could result in a write-up. The key word was could. It was up to the supervisor's discretion, and they were encouraged not to penalize employees unless there was a pattern of tardiness. I'd never been late before, not once, but my supervisor decided to throw the book at me anyway. A couple of weeks later, I was on my way to work when I hit another delay. This time it was construction that wasn't there the day before. I could see I was going to be about 15 minutes late. When I sat there in slow-moving traffic, I remembered that write-up and started thinking about the company policy. If I showed up 15 minutes late, I'd get written up. Same punishment if I showed up 2 hours late. Same write-up, same mark on my record. The punishment was identical whether I was 6 minutes late or 2 hours late. That's when I had an idea. I pulled off at the next exit and found a nice little family restaurant. The kind of place with checkered tablecloths and a breakfast menu that runs until 2 p.m. I ordered the works: eggs, bacon, sausage, hash browns, pancakes, orange juice, and more coffee. I took my time, read the newspaper, chatted with the waitress about the weather. 2.5 hours later, I walked into work. My supervisor was waiting for me with that same smug look on his face. He commented sarcastically about how I finally decided to show up, asking if it was another traffic jam. I told him that actually I had stopped for breakfast. He seemed shocked, asking if I was kidding him and pointing out that I was over 2 hours late. I confirmed that I was, but reminded him that it was the same write-up whether I was 6 minutes late or 2 hours late. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He knew I was right, but he couldn't quite figure out how to respond. He wrote me up just like I knew he would, but I could tell it bothered him that I wasn't upset about it. The next time I hit unexpected traffic that was going to make me about 10 minutes late, I did the same thing. Pulled off the highway, found a nice spot, and had a leisurely breakfast. 2 hours later, I showed up refreshed and well-fed. And the time after that, when road construction was going to make me 12 minutes late, I treated myself to breakfast at this great little diner I discovered. My supervisor started to catch on after the third incident. He'd write me up with this frustrated look on his face, like he knew I was beating him at his own game but couldn't figure out how to stop it. He told me I couldn't keep doing this, claiming it was disrupting the entire department. I reminded him that I was following company policy and that the penalty was the same whether I was 6 minutes late or 2 hours late. I was just making the most of it. He said that wasn't how it was supposed to work. I suggested that maybe he should have thought about that before he decided to write me up for 6 minutes when I had a perfect attendance record. I was still early 99% of the time. I never changed my routine or started leaving later, but on those rare occasions when unexpected delays were going to make me just a few minutes late, I'd turn it into a nice, relaxing breakfast break instead. After a few months of this, my supervisor stopped writing people up for minor delays. Word got around the factory about what I was doing, and other employees started pointing out the flaws in how the policy was being enforced. Eventually, management had to clarify that supervisors should use discretion and not penalize employees for occasional minor delays, especially when they had good attendance records. I still get to work early almost every day. I've been a single dad for about 3 years now. since my wife passed away from cancer. It's been tough raising my 12-year-old son on my own, but we've gotten pretty close through all of it. He's a good kid, respectful and smart, and I've taught him to stand up for himself when needed. Last Saturday was one of those perfect spring days where you just have to get outside. My son had been cooped up all week doing homework and playing video games, so I suggested we head to the local park. It's this nice community park with a playground, some walking trails, and plenty of open space where kids can run around. My son brought his phone with him because he'd been saving up his allowance for months to buy it, and he was pretty proud of having his own device. We got to the park around noon, and it was pretty busy with families enjoying the nice weather. My son found a spot on one of the benches near the playground and was showing me some game he'd downloaded while I kept an eye on the other kids playing. Everything was going fine until this woman showed up with her kid, who looked to be maybe 8 or 9 years old. I noticed them because the kid immediately started pointing at my son's phone and tugging on his mom's sleeve. The woman looked over at us, and I could tell she was sizing up the situation. She had that look that some parents get when they're about to ask for something they probably shouldn't ask for. Sure enough, she walked over to where we were sitting with her kid in tow. She didn't even introduce herself or say hello. Instead, she demanded that my son give her child his phone to play with because her kid had been good all week and deserved a treat. I was taken aback by how direct she was. My son looked up at me with confusion. I told her that the phone belonged to my son and that he had saved up his own money to buy it. The woman insisted it was just a phone and that kids need to learn to share. She said he could have it back when they left the park. My son told her no, and that he didn't want to give it to her kid because it was his. The woman's face started turning red, and her kid began whining louder. She accused my son of being selfish and said that good parents teach their children to share with others. I responded that good parents also teach their children that they can't just take other people's things. I made it clear we weren't giving her the phone. She seemed shocked that I wasn't backing down. Her kid was now full-on crying and demanding the phone. Instead of dealing with her own child's tantrum, she decided to double down on us. She announced that if I wouldn't be reasonable, she'd talk to my son directly. Before I could say anything, she walked around to where my son was sitting and got right up in his face. She told him that she was an adult and that when an adult tells a child to do something, they have to do it. She demanded he hand over the phone right then and there. My son told her no and that his dad had said he didn't have to give it up. That's when I stood up and started walking toward them. I could see this was escalating and I didn't like how she was talking to my kid. She yelled at him not to talk back to her and that she demanded respect. My son simply repeated that it was his phone and she couldn't have it. I was about halfway to them when I saw her raise her hand. Time seemed to slow down when I watched her wind up and slap my son across the face. The sound echoed across the playground, and several other parents turned to look. That's when something snapped in me. I went from walking quickly to running at full speed. All I could think about was protecting my child. This stranger had just hit my kid over a phone, and I wasn't going to let that slide. I reached them in seconds and didn't even slow down. I put my full body weight behind my fist and connected with her jaw. She dropped like a sack of potatoes, completely unconscious before she even hit the ground. Her kid started screaming, but I didn't care. I immediately knelt down next to my son, asking if he was hurt anywhere else and if she had grabbed him or done anything else. His cheek was red and he was crying, but he seemed okay otherwise. He told me she had only slapped him and asked why she had done that. I said I didn't know and that some people are just crazy. Within minutes, someone had called the police and they were on the scene. The woman was still unconscious, so they called for paramedics too. Several other parents who had witnessed the whole thing came over to give statements. One witness told the police they had seen the whole thing and that the woman had slapped the kid for no reason. They said the father was just protecting his son. Another parent said the woman had been completely unreasonable and asked who demands someone else's phone like that. A third witness confirmed that the kid had been polite the whole time and that the woman had just lost it when he wouldn't give up his phone. The police took statements from everyone, including me and my son. Our stories all matched up perfectly. The woman came to after about 10 minutes and the paramedics checked her out. She had a nasty bruise on her jaw but was otherwise fine. When the officer asked if I wanted to press charges, I didn't hesitate. I told him absolutely, explaining that she had assaulted my child over a phone and that wasn't normal behavior. The officer nodded and arrested her right there in the park. Her kid was crying and asking why mommy was in trouble. But honestly, I felt bad for him more than anything. Having a parent like that can't be easy. The woman protested loudly that it was ridiculous and that she had barely touched my son. She insisted they couldn't arrest her for disciplining a disrespectful child. The officer explained to her that it wasn't her child to discipline, that she had committed assault on a minor, and that the father had every right to press charges. They loaded her into the back of the police car while her kid went with what I assume was a relative who showed up. My son and I gave our final statements and headed home. For the whole drive back, my son kept asking me if he did something wrong. I assured him he handled it perfectly and that some adults just don't know how to act right. A few weeks later, we got a call that she'd been charged with assault and had to pay a fine plus attend anger management classes. I probably could have handled it differently, but nobody touches my kid. Nobody. My family wasn't wealthy, but we got by. My parents worked hard to put me through college, and I was determined to make them proud. I wasn't the most outgoing person, and making friends had always been tough for me. I spent most of my time studying, which meant I didn't have much of a social life. When I started college, I was excited about the fresh start. That's when I met her in my freshman year literature class. She was confident, popular, and somehow took an interest in being my friend. At first, I was grateful. Finally, someone wanted to hang out with me. But looking back, I realized she didn't want a friend. She wanted someone she could feel superior to. It started small. Little comments about my clothes, my hair, the way I talked. She'd laugh and say she was just joking, but her jokes always had an edge to them. I told myself she was being playful, that this was how friends talk to each other. I didn't have much experience with friendships, so I figured I was being too sensitive. She would ask me if I actually chose my shirt on purpose, acting shocked at my clothing choices. When I asked what was wrong with it, she'd tell me there was nothing wrong, just that it was very me. She'd say things like that all the time. When I gained a few pounds from cafeteria food, she'd poke my stomach and laugh. When I got a bad haircut, she'd joke about it for weeks. I laughed along because I didn't want to lose the only friend I had. The worst part was how she talked about my dating life, or lack of one. While she went through boyfriends like she was changing clothes, I stayed single. I was focused on my studies and honestly, I was shy around guys. But she made it sound like something was wrong with me. She would tell me that my problem was being too picky, but then she'd correct herself and say that wasn't it. She'd claim I just wasn't the type guys go for. When I tried to defend myself, she'd ask me, when was the last time a guy even looked at me twice? I'd try to argue back, but she'd just laugh and change the subject. She made me feel like I was lucky to have her as a friend, like no one else would put up with me. I started believing it. Things got worse when she started dating this guy in our junior year. He seemed nice enough, but she used their relationship as another way to put me down. She'd brag about how attractive he was, how other girls wanted him, how lucky she was. But then she'd turn it around on me. She told me that what was great about dating him was that she never had to worry about me stealing him. When I asked why she would worry about that anyway, she'd tell me to look at myself, then look at her. She'd say he'd never be interested in someone like me because I wasn't his type at all. She'd say this kind of thing in front of him too. He'd look uncomfortable, but he never said anything. I felt so small, so invisible. She made it clear that I was no threat to their relationship because I wasn't pretty enough or interesting enough to matter. She would boast that she could leave us alone for hours and nothing would happen. She said I was like a sister to him, not a woman. The constant put-downs wore me down. I started avoiding mirrors, wearing baggy clothes, keeping my head down. I believed everything she said about me. I thought I was ugly, boring, and unwanted. Then came the party. It was at some guy's house off campus, and she dragged me along. I didn't want to go, but she insisted. She said I needed to get out more. though I knew she just wanted someone to make her look better by comparison. We got there, and she immediately started drinking and flirting with other guys while her boyfriend watched. I felt bad for him. She was treating him like dirt, but he just stood there taking it. After about an hour, she wandered off somewhere, probably to cause more drama. I was sitting alone, feeling awkward and wanting to leave, when he came over. He asked if I was okay because I looked uncomfortable. I told him I was fine, just not really a party person. He said he understood because these things could be overwhelming. We started talking and something amazing happened. He actually listened to me. He asked about my classes, my interests, my plans after graduation. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was seeing me as a real person, not just Karen's pathetic sidekick. He told me I was really smart and said he never realized I was majoring in psychology. When I mentioned that Karen didn't like it when I talked about school stuff because she said it was boring, he disagreed. He said it wasn't boring at all and that he found it fascinating how the mind works. We talked for over an hour. He was funny, kind, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. When Karen finally came back, drunk and loud, she barely noticed we'd been talking. After that night, he started texting me, just friendly messages at first, asking how my day was, sharing funny memes. I was nervous about it, but I enjoyed having someone to talk to who didn't make me feel bad about myself. He would tell me I should give myself more credit and that I was a lot more interesting than I thought. When I mentioned that Karen said I was pretty boring, he replied that Karen said a lot of things, but that didn't make them true. We started meeting up for coffee between classes. He'd help me with subjects I was struggling with, and I'd listen when he needed to vent about his relationship problems. Because yes, he had problems with Karen. She was controlling, jealous, and mean to him too. He told me about how she went through his phone and got mad because he liked some girl's Instagram photo. When I said that wasn't normal behavior, he agreed but explained that she told him if he really loved her, he wouldn't even look at other girls. The more we talked, the more I realized that Karen was toxic to everyone around her. She'd isolated me from other potential friends, made me feel worthless, and now she was doing the same thing to him. We bonded over our shared experiences of dealing with her manipulation. Our friendship grew stronger. He made me feel confident for the first time in years. When I looked in the mirror, I started seeing someone worthy of love instead of the ugly, boring girl Karen had convinced me I was. He would tell me I had a pretty smile and that I should do it more often. When I mentioned that Karen always said I looked weird when I smiled, he'd say that Karen was wrong about a lot of things. 6 months later it happened. We were studying together in the library. There was this moment where we both looked up at the same time. The attraction had been building for weeks, but we'd both been trying to ignore it. That night, we couldn't anymore. We knew it was wrong. We knew it would hurt Karen, but we also knew that what we had was real, and what she had with him was just possession and control. We started seeing each other in secret, feeling guilty but also happier than either of us had been in years. The secret lasted 2 months. Karen found out when she saw us holding hands off campus. She confronted me the next day, and it was ugly. She called me a backstabbing snake and said she knew I was jealous of her. When I tried to tell her it wasn't like that, she told me not to lie to her. She accused me of being after him the whole time and called me pathetic. She called me every name in the book, said I was a terrible friend, that I was ugly and desperate, that I'd stolen him because I couldn't get a man on my own. She blocked me on everything and told everyone who would listen that I was a home-wrecking snake. The funny thing is, he broke up with her that same day, not because of me, but because our relationship had opened his eyes to how toxic she was. He realized he deserved better than someone who tore him down and controlled his every move. Karen screamed at me that I thought I'd won something, but that he'd get tired of me just like everyone else does. I told her maybe that was true, but at least he treated me with respect. She left bitterly and said respect meant nothing because I was just his rebound. She claimed he'd dump me as soon as someone better came along. She was wrong. We've been together for 8 years now, married for 5. We have 2 beautiful kids and a life built on mutual respect and love. He tells me I'm beautiful every day, and I finally believe it. He encourages my dreams, celebrates my successes, and supports me through challenges. Karen tried to reach out a few years ago through social media. She'd been through 3 more relationships that ended badly. I think she was lonely. She sent me a message saying she missed our friendship and wanted to reconnect. I didn't respond. Some bridges are meant to stay burned. The girl who once told me I was too ugly to get a man, who said no one would ever want me, who made me feel invisible and worthless. I'm now married to her ex-boyfriend, living the happy life she said I'd never have. I've been working in the entertainment industry for 8 years now, starting as a production assistant and slowly climbing my way up. Last year, I finally got my big break, a promotion to creative director at a major production company. It wasn't easy getting here, especially as a plus-sized woman in an industry that can be incredibly judgmental about appearance. I've had to work twice as hard to prove myself, and I've learned that presentation matters, whether we like it or not. My niece is 15 and has recently discovered sewing through social media. She's passionate about it, which I genuinely admire. I've always supported her creative pursuits. I wear the slightly scratchy acrylic scarf she made me, and I've complimented her on various projects she's shown me. When she asked if she could make me something casual to wear around the house, I agreed without hesitation. I love seeing her excited about creating things. Her technique as well. It's very much influenced by social media trends. She follows tutorials that prioritize speed and authenticity over proper construction. Her seams are often crooked, she doesn't press her work, and she leaves threads hanging everywhere. When I gently suggested she might want to learn some finishing techniques, she dismissed my advice. She told me that her way was more authentic and that all the influencers say perfect sewing is boring and corporate. I didn't push it. She's learning and everyone starts somewhere. 3 weeks ago, I got the news that I'd be speaking at the industry's biggest annual conference. This is huge for my career, the kind of opportunity that could open doors I've been trying to get through for years. I immediately contacted my tailor to have a dress made. I wanted something that would photograph well under stage lights and make me feel confident. That's when my niece approached me with her request. She told me she wanted to make me a dress for my big speech, saying it would be so special and we could bond over it. I explained that I already had a dress being made, but she insisted I could wear that one to something else instead. She said this would be way more meaningful because she made it with love. I told her I appreciated the offer, but that I couldn't accept because this was a really important event for my career. She kept pushing, saying it would be such a bonding experience for us. There it was, the magic phrase that gets thrown around constantly in my family. Everything has to be a bonding experience between the adults and kids. Want to go grocery shopping alone? Nope, make it a bonding experience. Need to run errands? Better bring a kid along for bonding. It's exhausting having every simple activity turned into a teaching moment or family event. When I maintained my position, my niece ran to her mother, my sister-in-law. Within an hour, I got a phone call. Karen called me ridiculous and said it was just a dress. I explained that it wasn't just a dress, that this was the biggest speaking engagement of my career. She accused me of caring too much about my appearance and being superficial. This isn't the first time she's criticized my choices. When I bought myself an expensive handbag after getting promoted, she went into a whole rant about how stupid I was for not thrifting one instead. When I was briefly engaged last year, she constantly criticized my wedding planning, insisting I should just use whatever decorations she could find on Facebook Marketplace instead of choosing things I actually liked. She told me that her daughter was just a kid who wanted to do something nice for her aunt, and that I was crushing her dreams. I replied that I wasn't crushing anything and that I support her sewing all the time, but I just didn't want to wear something she made to a professional event. Karen accused me of thinking I was better than them with my fancy job and designer bags. I explained that this had nothing to do with thinking I was better than anyone, that this was about my career. She argued that my career wasn't more important than family. I told her that in this specific instance, yes it was, because this speech could change my entire professional trajectory. The conversation went downhill from there. She accused me of being selfish, materialistic, and caring more about strangers' opinions than my own family. She hung up on me when I refused to budge. For the next 2 weeks, I got the silent treatment from that side of the family. My niece was apparently devastated. According to the messages I received from various relatives, I started second guessing myself. Was I being too harsh? Was I prioritizing the wrong things? Then, 3 days before my speech, my niece showed up at my apartment with a garment bag. She told me she made it anyway because she wanted to surprise me. She unzipped the bag to reveal what can only be described as a disaster. It was clearly made from bed sheets, floral ones with a pattern that would photograph terribly under stage lights. The seams were crooked, the neckline was asymmetrical, and it looked like it would fit someone 3 sizes smaller than me. She excitedly explained that she used the measurements from that dress in my closet and asked if it wasn't perfect. The dress she'd measured was a fitted casual dress that I wear around the house, completely different from my body shape in professional attire. The construction was so poor that I could see it would fall apart if I tried to put it on. I gently told her I couldn't wear it. She asked why not, saying she worked so hard on it. I explained that it didn't fit properly and this was a professional event. She burst into tears and called her mother. Within minutes, my phone was ringing. Karen demanded to know how I dared make her daughter cry, saying she spent weeks on that dress. I tried to explain that I understood she worked hard but asked if she would wear this to an important work event if she looked at it objectively. She snapped back that not everyone could afford fancy tailors like me. I clarified that this wasn't about money but about the quality of construction and appropriateness for the venue. She called me a snob who thought she was too good for handmade gifts. That's when I'd had enough. I told her that if she wanted to make this about being a snob, I'd explain what would really happen if I wore that dress. The seams would split when I walked on stage. The neckline would gape when I leaned toward the microphone. The fabric would wrinkle under the lights and make me look unprofessional in front of industry leaders who could make or break my career. And because I'm plus-sized, every imperfection would be magnified and criticized online afterward. She said I was being dramatic. I told her I'd show her something and took photos of the dress from multiple angles, sending them to her. I asked her to look at them objectively. The left seam was 2 inches higher than the right. The armholes were so small I couldn't get my arms through them, and the hem was uneven by at least 4 inches. I explained that this wasn't about being mean to her daughter, but about basic garment construction. There was silence on the other end of the line. I continued saying that I loved her creativity and supported her learning, but wearing this to a professional event wouldn't be supporting her. It would be setting both of us up for failure. Karen quietly admitted that maybe it needed some adjustments. I explained that it needed to be completely remade by someone with advanced sewing skills, which she didn't have yet, and that was okay. The next day I got a text from my niece. She apologized for being pushy about it, saying she looked up pictures of the conference online and could see why I couldn't wear her dress. I texted back that she didn't need to apologize for being passionate about her craft and that I was proud of her for trying something challenging. She asked if she could come watch my speech online because she wanted to see how important this was to me. I told her I'd love that. The speech went perfectly. I felt confident in my professionally tailored dress and the presentation was well received. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.